500 pages a day. Gosh. You wouldn't be able to do that drunk. I don't understand what this girl's going on about. I'm being mean, but she's wrong. This person is wrong. Shot at with arrows, which I don't think happens to a lot of people in the present day. Well, sucks for you because you missed out on a great time. What are you going on about? Hello and welcome back to day 7 of Bookmas. Today I'm going to be reacting to 1-star reviews of my favourite book. Well, it's not my favourite book. It is the first book in my favourite series of all time. So that's why I'm starting with the first book, because I feel like actually doing my favourite one in the series is a little bit weird because it's slap bang in the middle of the series. That's not even complete yet. You'll know what I mean when I say it. So it is Way of Kings by Brandon Sanderson. Now, you know, I love Brandon Sanderson. He is my favourite author in the world. He is incredible. My dude. But not everyone agrees with me, and that is an incredibly sad fact. But we're going to dive into that today, and we're going to react to some bad reviews of Way of Kings. Now, Way of Kings is a big book. It's 1,000, no it's not. It's a 1,000-page long book. It's a big boy, but I love it. I have listened to it multiple times. I've read it. I read it physically in firstly. I just love it. I think it's a great book. There's so much information there that you can reread it and get something new from it every time. But people disagree. So let's go into this. First review is incredibly long. I'm just going to read the beginning bit. This is by Madeline, and she's rated it 1 star. So if you have read The Way of Kings, which you shouldn't do, going in strong, but if you have to because your dad gave it to you and he's your dad, I recommend you do it while a little bit drunk. It makes this book a lot more fun. For example, when the passage like this occurs, she stared eastwards, her expression horrified, eyes wide and sorrowful. It was the face of a child watching a brutal murder that stole her innocence. Well, I'd much rather read it whilst this sort of thing while slightly drunk. What's wrong with that sentence? She calls that a howler. She found that funny. I don't find that funny. Apparently you could make a drinking game out of this book. That would be quite fun. Maybe we should do that. That would be a cool video. I'll do a drinking game about a book. Brandon Sanderson repeats every information at least 3 times and rehashes characterizations infinitely, so you're unlikely to lose track of where you are because things have gone too quickly or subtly. Surely that's quite good in quite a large book, you know, where there's so much information that you could get lost quite easily. I've never noticed it, so if it was something that was repeated, it was probably because I needed it to be repeated. I've read this book and listened to this book multiple times. I still don't remember everything that happened in it. It's a very large book. There is a lot going on. There's a lot of storylines in this book. So I feel like that's maybe necessary in something so epic and so grand. It's like the whole thing was written as an audiobook. Is that bad? Surely you read something to be written so that you can then tell it as a story, no? If a book can't be read out loud, does not make it a bad book, I would say? With the assumption that no one would pause it during bathroom breaks, so it goes quickly. I could probably have read it in a day or 2 if I cared enough. That's impressive, because that's a fucking hefty book. I mean, the audiobook's like 30 hours long, but still 1,000 pages, you can read 500 pages a day. Gosh. You wouldn't be able to do that drunk, so you'd have to stay sober. It isn't entirely unsalvageable. So far, mate, you've not given me anything to disagree. Like, all the things you've said are positives. I don't understand what this girl's going on about. Nothing she said is bad. The world building seems to get a lot of praise and reviews, but reading the book, it seems like he'd rather be a video or computer game writer or designer than a novel writer. There's a distinct wow feel to this book. Why is this 1 star? This world has a lot of gimmicks and the plot is really no forward momentum. It's going to be a 10-page book? 10-book series. It's got a lot of momentum. There's just a lot of groundwork. It's the first book of a 10-book series. Like, you've got to be in for the long run, you know? This is not something you read in a weekend. It's a commitment. I don't like this. It's like everyone is bouncing around until they reach the next level. I'm just saying, when you find yourself writing about anticipation spren, that is a red flag. The spren mean something. You need to commit to the book to understand, but the spren mean something. If you cut out the prelude and the prologue, they also mean things. You just have to be committed. She just is criticizing it for no reason. Like, everything she's saying is stupid. It's not stupid, it's all true, but it's not a bad thing, so I don't get why it's a 1-star review. I would put this as a 5-star review and write pretty much exactly the same thing. You can't cut out the prologue and the prelude because you need the prologue and the prelude because you need them because it's a 10-book series and there's a lot going on and you don't know about that until the 3rd book. I'm being mean, but she's wrong. This person is wrong. The other big problem, as you might have guessed, is that Sanderson thinks his readers are very stupid. I disagree. I think he loves his fans. Thank you very much. For example, if something important has just happened, and most of the book has been devoted to its occurrence, I don't need something just changed, Moash whispered, hand up. Something important. Yeah, but that's their character. Yeah, we'd already got there. It's terrible writing anyway, just from an aesthetic perspective. I don't need every bit of characterization spelled out for me. For one, a bit of ambiguity is valuable, otherwise it looks like a casting call or stage directions. For another, character is expressed by dialogue and action, and if a writer is a good hand in at least one of those, then a passage like this. Navani was always in her most genuine when playing with new Fabrials. It was one of the few times when one got to see her without any pretense. This isn't Navani the king's mother or Navani the political schemer. This was Navani the excited engineer. Was entirely unnecessary. Why is that unnecessary? Maybe I'm a bad writer or I'm a bad reader, but I don't see anything wrong with that. If we're going with this girl's perspective, you should be able to cut that all out and say that Navani was excited about engineering. That's all you'd need. But that doesn't tell us that she's being genuine, that she's different from how she acts when she's being a mother or a king, or the other kind of pressures of society that she's had, roles that she's had to fill for society. No, I wouldn't get that from that sentence. It's showing that Navani has different, that she acts different, that she's got pressures when she has to be a king's mother. She's got all these other roles that she has to fit when actually she just wants to be an engineer. You know, that's when she is most happy. But she can't do that because she's a woman and she's got all these other things that she has to do. As a mother, as a wife. I don't know. I think I'm right. Whatever. The battle fight scenes were so boring. That's just wrong. One of the most incredible battle scenes I've ever seen or read has been in a Brandon Sanderson book. It's Oathbringer. It's book 3 of this series. It's phenomenal. Absolutely phenomenal. I was just gasping the entire time. But she didn't wait and read the rest. I don't know how long that took me, but that was the first review. Okay, we're going to move on to another one that is slightly shorter. This person says that they are giving up on this one, and I'm seriously befuddled. So am I, mate. So am I. We're in the same boat. I don't know why you're giving up. The reviews for this book so uniformly wonderful and full of good things, great world building, well thought out magic systems, and the stuff I look for in fantasy. So I was really surprised when it turned out everything I hate about the fantasy world, about fantasy novels. Full on hoodoo. I don't know what hoodoo is, but let's find out. My best experiences with fantasy novels have always begun from a relatable place. A world mostly like ours and characters with recognizable emotions, desires, and problems make the rest of the author's universe palatable. But when your first introduction is to the weird, it doesn't compel me to read further. Now that's interesting. So for me, fantasy is great because it is completely different to our world, but the characters are more often than not grappling with things to often a higher extent, and the stakes are often higher, but things that people do in day-to-day life, whether that be loss, morally ambiguous situations where they have to choose what's right and wrong. Normally they're about murdering people, and I don't come across that personally in my personal life a lot, but they are emotions that you kind of can understand. So I get where she's coming from, is that you need something to ground yourself in fantasy, and normally that's through the emotions and the characters' kind of stakes, the decisions that they have to make. However, Brandon Sanderson puts a lot of that in his books. Maybe the immediate thing is because the first prologue is what the heck, I have no idea what's going on here. So that's fair enough. And the second prologue is incredibly similar to that in that you don't know what the hell is going on here. But it's also quite a typical fantasy that it's a fight scene that's high stakes, a lot of action going on. And then when you get into the main storyline, you're dealing with someone with incredible depression, which I feel like is probably quite relatable to a lot of people. His circumstances aren't. He's captured and branded as slave and being sold into carrying bridges for an army and then shot at with arrows, which I don't think happens to a lot of people in the present day. But he's grappling with a severe amount of depression. That, I think, is a very human emotion, and I think is done really well by Brandon Sanderson. So I don't know what unrecognizable emotions she's dealing with, or it's not seeing. I don't understand. I don't know what exactly. She's not specified exactly what it is, but long action sequences up front. I feel like I fell into Boris Vallejo's nightmare. I don't know who that is. Call me uncultured. Let's Google. Is a Peruvian-American painter who works on science fiction, fantasy, and erotica scenes. Ooh, spicy. He looks like he might have done old fantasy covers when they were originally painted. So yeah, he's a visual writer. That's why I like Brandon Sanderson. And there's a lot, like, he is very descriptive. So you can visualize his scenes incredibly easily, even though they are completely made up and often with concepts we've never even thought of. I don't know. I think it's done really well, and that you can situate the scene very well, even though there's literally people running up and along the ceiling and the walls and flying about and doing random shit in the first prologue or the second prologue. I don't see what's wrong with that. I like it. Ganky names. What the heck is that word? Ganky? Maybe is that American thing? Ganky? I don't know what that means, but that sounds wrong. Nasty, gross, disgusting. That's what I would have thought that meant. I don't think that's what she means. I think she means like awkward, gangly, fierce Spren and void bringers. This is bad adolescent writing. Why? It's just what they're called. They are the bringers of voids. And fierce Spren, they're literally, Spren are these characters that they're these little, I don't know how to describe them. These little like manifestations of emotions. So fierce Spren are manifestations of fear in like a kind of physical spawn and spawn? Yeah, they kind of spawn and they kind of just appear and disappear when the emotion arises. So like if you're concentrating, there's concentration Spren. If you're in love, there's love Spren, that kind of thing, you know? But everything has a Spren, so it's not just emotions, but also objects and things like that. So the fact that they're called fierce Spren is just a logical name, you know? Things that you put on top of a table, you call a tabletop. You don't invent something new for it. Goo. Goo is the fourth thing that she doesn't like. Every emotion seems to have corresponding fairy-type creature associated with it called Spren. In the opening pages, one of these is described as a globs of purple goo. Really clunky, weak, and artful. Why? I don't get what's wrong with calling something purple goo if it looks like purple goo. Maybe he should have said softly wobbling warbles of deeper violet, thick, sticky moisture. That's all I can think of to describe that in that second. That doesn't make sense. Globs of purple goo, it does the job. I was not impressed. A few reviewers say that they've kept reading and that things pick up about 800 pages in. No offense, I can read 3 books that was 800-page investment. I don't care to put that kind of time into a book that's so frustrating me in 200 pages. Well, sucks for you because you missed out on a great time. I'm going to move on, otherwise I'm going to get incredibly annoyed. So, this dude says that The Way of Kings is tedium defined. I don't think he liked the length. What novel is everyone else reading? My objections to this tome are almost its equal in length. I wish to be fair and mete out credit where due, and martial criticism only when I think justified. So this guy seems reasonable. You know, he's thought a lot about this. I mean, he has given it a 1 star, so we're going to disagree. But there is really 4 main characters in this 1,000-page novel, one of whom is myriad lengthy, unnecessary flashbacks, not little flashes, mind you, and dozens of chapters. Okay, to be fair, I think he's talking about Kaladin there. Kaladin's flashbacks are a lot, and they weren't my favourite thing in the book, I have to admit. The world is at war with a nebulous enemy, lots of weird generic sounding prophecy is banded about, and everyone is Mary Sue. I don't know who Mary Sue is. A character archetype in fiction, usually a young woman who is often portrayed as inexplicably competent across all domains, gifted and unique talents of powers, liked or respected by most other characters. So there's characters that have no flaws, basically. I can see that as well, but that does change as the series goes on. Except for a few, maybe? No, maybe not, actually. Yeah, I can see that, to be fair. The good stuff, the storms are great. Although this borrows from A Song of Ice and Fire, having a world beset by extreme meteorological conditions is plausible and relatively fresh. It seizes on the unexplicably or medieval conflicts and how they can be decided by factors beyond human control. Action. I don't need much on this to be satisfied with sci-fi or fantasy. In fairness, The Way of Kings has far too little physical combat when compared to its ridiculous dialogue and long expositions, but often Brandon Sanderson does a nice, clean job of the combat and the magic system. Good, so this guy disagrees with the other person. He likes the combat. I'm agreeing with this dude so far. Gender roles. Interesting, because that's what I thought people might have an issue with. Only women are literate in this world. It's an interesting dynamic with lots of possibilities for narrative subtlety. Deceptions or mechanisms for keeping the societies coherent. Ultimately, this falls through because nothing interesting ever happens. Vice versa, this huge difference in education between men and women. Men fight and run armies, women manage lands and letters and books and so on. This is the literal and dull extent of which Brandon Sanderson takes it. Yes, I do think he could have done more with that. It is a very interesting concept. So basically in this world, the gender roles are very kind of split down the middle at the initial start of the world. You have masculine kind of activities and roles and feminine activities and roles. And reading is one of the feminine activities and roles. So they are the ones that write all the letters, the men just kind of dictate what they want. And then at the bottom of the role, the letter, they kind of put little side notes of what they actually think and their own opinions in, which is quite fun. Show is greater than tell. Whenever a character is placed in an introduction, Sanderson please explain him or her to us directly immediately. Soulless info dump around, nothing is ever shown to the reader. There is no personality and no flavour to any of the narrative. I don't agree with that. I think there's lots of personalities. every single person and main character, you can tell who they are when you read their chapters. You don't necessarily need a name to be placed in there. So I think that makes them quite distinctive with their personalities and thoughts. And it's a big book. There's a lot going on. You need a little bit of info dumping. It's just necessary. I don't mind it. Some people hate info dumping, obviously, but sometimes I just like it to be told to me straight, you know? No land or culture means anything to me except that the Parshendi are bad and violent and paint their faces. They don't paint their faces, I don't think. Their skin is just mottled. I don't know about that. I don't think they do. I thought they just had mottled skin, but I might be remembering that wrong. It's unthinking, unflinching, pleased with its details merely because the details exist. If everyone is a melictosed shadow of a human being, I don't know why do people use such fancy words? A timid or feeble person. Well, just say that, man. No one needs melictosed shadow of a being. Things are tedious, get tedious fast. That tribe, they paint their faces. That one, they have such and such religion based on X, Y, and Z. Explained immediately after some dialogue about their religion. It is a babble already forgotten. Every single character is impossibly daft and literal. A conversation with one of the cleverest heroes is presented below, and there are dozens of similar quality. So, a conversation between a male merchant and Shallan, a female character, about buying used books. Okay, let's see what this is. Is ambition such an unseemly attribute to a young woman? Well, no, I suppose not. He smiled again, the thick, toothy smile of a merchant trying to put someone to ease. I can see you are a woman of discriminating taste. I am, Shallan said, voice firm though her heart fluttered. Was she destined to get into an argument with everyone she met? I do like my meals prepared very carefully, as my palate is very delicate. Pardon? I meant that you have discriminating tastes in books. I have never eaten one, actually. Groan fucking groan. Shallan's meant to be this witty character that does all these things, but it's not necessarily. It's like, she's very quick and on her feet. If you've watched Gilmore Girls, she's kind of a little bit like Lorelai, you know? She just has these like quippy things to come back at everyone very fast. But it's not necessarily something even she attributes as a good quality in herself. It's a defense mechanism to something that happened a long time ago that she's trying to combat, and kind of like, it's her defense basically, is these quips. I mean, that's just part of who she is. No one else in the book has these kind of comebacks, so I'm not really sure what the other things. The characters are quite literal, a lot of them. They don't speak in, I don't know what these people are criticizing, because they don't sound like criticisms to me. Nothing funny happens ever. Actually, I think I've laughed a few times in it. Not very often, but I don't think it's quite hard to put humour in fantasy if you're not going to be able to do it well. I think it's good to not put it in. If you don't think you can write fantasy humour well, don't put it in, because then it comes across clunky and bad and distasteful. So why is it bad that he didn't have anything funny in it? I don't know. No cursing or any adult situations of any kind. Brandon Sanderson does not have any kind of thing like that in his books. He doesn't have sex scenes. He doesn't have vulgar language. That's not his style of writing. It's not a grim, dark fantasy. He himself doesn't want to put that in his book. As it says, perhaps it's the author's Mormonism. He's Mormon. I don't think he would have that in his books. That doesn't make it a bad book. There is no adult dialogue or adult situation to be found in the 1007 pages herein. When people curse, they normally say, storm you, which slaps me right out of the story, but that's because their whole world is built on storms. That's like saying Jesus Christ in our world. Their God is a storm god. Do you know what I mean? If they said Jesus Christ, that would bring me out of the book, because there is no Jesus in this world. There is no sex or even romance or even a hint of one adult interpersonal dynamic. This is a trivial medieval society with tensions over land and religion power, albatrossed by a Sunday school content filter. Why is this author so stultified when it comes to real adult fantasy? Adult fantasy doesn't necessarily mean that there's sex and swearing. I don't think that should be a defining factor of the genre. If it has sex and swearing in it, there definitely shouldn't be YA, but that doesn't automatically mean that it is the quality of adult fantasy. Adult fantasy to me means that the world is much more complex, the political systems are complex, the ideas and concepts and character troubles are much harder to discuss, or are more detailed, or involve more kind of meditation. Did that make sense? I don't know. That to me is adult fantasy. Doesn't really necessarily mean that it has to have a sex scene. The Wheel of Time is practically pornographic next to Stormlight, which should be in the YA section. Of course, fantasy doesn't need to be dirty or violent to be good, but the absence of any naughtiness or profusion of awkward workabouts, particularly for sexual tension, is conspicuous. I don't think it is. I completely disagree there. I think you're wrong. Atrocious writing and shameful world building? What are you going on about? This is not a new or particularly interesting world. There's so much going on in this world. He's created an entire world, okay? It's not just like a normal fantasy where you get one country perhaps detailed with culture and religion and all that kind of thing. This has an entire world that has different countries, different civilizations, each with their own religion, each with their own culture, each with their own traditions, everything, their own nature system, their own everything is different in this world. Like, it's so detailed. What's wrong with it? People are criticizing the word again because you didn't come up with something over ostentatious that you didn't understand and have no idea what it is, because that's what fantasy people tend to do. You don't need to do that. Incredibly literal and boring magic. When somebody is mad, anger spren, stop criticizing the spren. You do not know anything about the spren yet. Leave the spren be till you know more. Every chapter is preceded by an expert of historical text, so you don't know what that is yet. This would be cool if it was cohesive. It isn't, or led to reveal. It doesn't. It does lead to reveal. It is cohesive. You just have to wait till book 3 to find it, which might frustrate some people. I understand that. But I think it's a work of genius. Cliches, whatever. I'm getting bored of these people now. They just seem to be criticizing things that I think are ridiculous to criticize. Like, they're overly thinking, like, what's wrong with calling a fierce bren, you know? What's wrong with this? I don't understand what's wrong. The author has explicitly stated that there shall be 10-volume series. This is a critique, by the way. This is the kiss of death. No one should cohesively make such a preposterous estimate of length, except to impress us with page count. Sanderson has got, like, a rough, I think, outline, but for all 10 books. He will write them because Brandon Sanderson writes a shit ton. He's also been writing Way of Kings for 10 years before he even published the book. You know, like, it's not just a flimsy thing that he's just written in a couple years. You know, that he's dedicated his entire lifetime to this series. All his other books are related to this series. Well, in the Stormlight Archive. You know, like, this is not something... People are annoying me. Okay, so I know that was only three reviews, but I can't do any more because they're all saying the same thing and it's all annoying me because they're all wrong. So I'm going to wrap up here. I realise it's probably quite not... I don't know, I feel like it's not a very universal video if you've not read Way of Kings, or it's not your favourite book, or you don't know anything about it, but it just... it annoyed me. They haven't given it enough time to really get good. But it is good, like, even the first, I love that book. But I know people don't like it, it's fine. They can not like it. It's fine, they can not like it, it's fine. I don't care. But yes, I'm going to wrap up because I'm now a little bit annoyed. So I'm going to wrap this video up. I hope you enjoyed this. Merry Christmas, by the way. Keeping the festive cheer. I hope you had a good time watching this video. Please do like and subscribe. I will see you in the next video very soon.